The night was cold, and the sky above the junkyard was filled with broken clouds. The air smelled of rust and smoke, a place where dead machines and old ships came to rest. Elias, the scavenger, walked slowly between the piles of metal, his boots crunching on the dirt. He had lived here most of his life, surviving by collecting scraps and selling them to traders. For him, the junkyard was not a graveyard. It was a place of treasure, a place where life could continue. That night, something different caught his eye. A faint blue glow came from under a mountain of broken ship parts. At first, Elias thought it was just a broken power cell, ready to explode. But when he pushed away the pieces of metal, he found something strange. It was not a machine, but a pod, cracked open and leaking strange mist. Inside the pod was a young alien girl. Her skin was pale silver, her eyes glowing faintly, even though she was weak. She looked no older than 16 in human years, but her body was covered in wounds and scars. She was breathing slowly, almost ready to die. Elias froze, unsure what to do. He had found many strange things in the dump, but never a living creature. He looked around, afraid someone else had seen. If the government knew about her, they would come with guns. If the smugglers knew, they would sell her to the highest bidder. If the raiders knew, they would kill her for sport. Elias felt his heart beat faster. He had no reason to help her, yet he could not walk away. He whispered to himself, "What are you doing, Elias?" But still, he lifted the alien out of the pod. She was light, too light, as if she had been starved for weeks. Her head rested on his shoulder, and for the first time in years, Elias felt something strange. He felt responsible, as if fate had placed her in his hands. He carried her to his small shack at the edge of the scrapyard. Inside, the place was dark and filled with tools, spare parts, and old blankets. He laid her on his bed, covering her with a sheet. Her breathing was shallow, and Elias feared she would not survive the night. He searched his supplies, found water, and slowly helped her drink. She coughed weakly but swallowed, her glowing eyes opening just a little. Elias stared into those eyes, feeling a strange chill. They were not human eyes, but they held something human inside them, a kind of fear, a kind of hope. "Don't die here," he whispered, though he was not sure why. He had never cared for anyone in years, not since the war took his family, yet here he was, saving a creature he did not even know. Outside, the scrapyard was silent, but Elias felt watched. The blue glow of the pod still flickered in the distance. He thought he saw shadows moving between the piles of junk. Someone, or something, had also noticed the pod. He closed the door and locked it, his mind racing. What kind of alien was she, and why was she thrown away like trash? As the night grew darker, the alien girl moved her lips. Her voice was faint, broken, but Elias could hear a word. "Hunter," she whispered, before falling back into sleep. Elias sat frozen, the word echoing in his mind. Who was the hunter? And why was this girl running from them? The scrapyard suddenly felt more dangerous than ever, and Elias realized he had just stepped into a story bigger than himself. Morning came slowly over the scrapyard. The first rays of sunlight touched the towers of broken ships and dead machines. Elias woke with heavy eyes, his back aching from sleeping on the chair beside the bed. The alien girl still lay there, breathing weak but steady. He was relieved she had survived the night. For hours, Elias kept watching her, wondering what to do next. He had hidden many things in his life, tools, food, even weapons, but never a living alien. He knew that if anyone discovered her, his life would end. The government did not forgive men who kept secrets like this. Yet every time he thought about abandoning her, he looked at her face and could not. He gave her more water, tore old cloth into bandages, and cleaned her wounds. Her skin was strange, soft like silk, but with a metallic shine when the light hit it. Elias whispered to her as he worked, though she never answered. He told her about the scrapyard, about the world outside, and about how people lived here. He spoke not because she understood, but because his silence felt heavier than steel. Later that day, she opened her eyes again. This time, her gaze stayed on him longer, as if she was trying to study him. She did not speak, but when he gave her a piece of bread, she tried to eat it. Her hands trembled, but she managed to swallow. Elias nodded to himself, whispering, "You are stronger than you look." Days passed slowly, and the girl grew a little better each time. She began to move, to sit, even to look around the shack with curiosity. Elias noticed she learned fast, faster than any child he had seen. When he showed her how to drink from a cup, she copied him perfectly the next time. When he said a word, she repeated it softly, her strange voice carrying an echo. One evening, she finally spoke her name. Lyra, she said, pointing to herself, her eyes glowing faint in the dark. Elias nodded, repeating, Lyra, and she gave a small smile. It was the first time he had seen her smile, and it made the shack feel less empty. But outside, the world was not silent. Rumors spread through the scrapyard about strange lights, about shadows moving at night. Some workers claimed they heard machines come alive on their own. Others said they saw a figure carrying something from the dump. Elias knew the rumors were about him, and fear began to creep into his chest. One night, while Elias was repairing a broken tool, he heard footsteps outside. He froze, holding his breath. The footsteps stopped near his door, then moved away slowly. He opened the curtain slightly and saw a figure in the distance, watching. The shape melted back into the piles of scrap before he could see clearly. Elias sat in silence, his mind racing. Had someone seen Lyra, or were they simply curious about him? He could not take the risk. He reinforced the door, checked his weapons, and warned Lyra to stay quiet. Though she barely knew human words, her eyes told him she understood. That night, Lyra surprised him again. She touched his arm and whispered, "Danger," in her broken voice. Her glowing eyes stared at the window as if she could see something beyond. Elias felt a chill run down his spine. He wanted to ask her more, but before he could, a sound cut through the night. Engines, heavy and powerful, roared at the edge of the scrapyard. Elias rushed outside and saw floodlights sweeping across the metal heaps. Armored trucks rolled in, soldiers shouting orders. They were searching, and they were searching for something specific. Elias's heart sank as he realized the truth. They were here for Lyra. The scrapyard was no longer silent. Engines growled like hungry beasts, and bright lights cut through the darkness. Elias crouched low behind a pile of rusted metal, his breath tight in his chest. Beside him, Lyra trembled, her silver skin glowing faintly under the harsh beams. Soldiers moved in squads, scanning the ground, shouting codes into radios. Elias whispered, "Stay down, don't move." Lyra nodded, her glowing eyes fixed on the soldiers as if she had seen them before. Elias knew these men. They were not ordinary guards. They wore black armor with red symbols, the mark of the government's special hunters. Whenever these hunters came, someone vanished and was never seen again. A voice shouted through a loudspeaker, "We know it's here. Search every corner. Nothing leaves this dump." The soldiers spread out, kicking over crates, tearing through piles of scrap. Elias's mind raced. He had no weapons strong enough to fight them. His shack was already exposed. The broken door would tell them someone was hiding. He needed to move, and fast. He grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her deeper into the scrapyard. Her steps were unsteady, but she followed, silent as a shadow. They crawled through narrow spaces between rusted ships, the metal cold under their hands. Every noise sounded louder in Elias's ears. The scrape of his boots, the clink of falling bolts. He prayed the soldiers wouldn't hear, but then a beam of light passed over them. "Over there," a soldier shouted, weapons raised. Elias pushed Lyra forward, and they dashed through the maze of wreckage. Bullets cracked against the metal, sparks flying. Lyra stumbled, but Elias dragged her on, refusing to stop. They ducked into the hollow shell of an old cargo ship. Elias pressed Lyra against the wall, his heart pounding. The footsteps grew closer, the hunters sweeping their lights into the ship's dark interior. Elias Naum. He could not hide her forever. Sooner or later, they would find them. Suddenly, Lyra's voice broke the silence, soft but clear. "They want me," she whispered, her words shaking. Elias turned to her, shocked. "What do you mean?" Lyra touched her chest, her eyes glowing brighter. "I was made," she said slowly, her voice halting as she struggled with the human words. "Made for war." Elias stared, unable to believe it. She wasn't just an alien child. She was something more, something created, something the hunters would never stop chasing. "Why you?" he asked, but Lyra only shook her head, tears glimmering in her strange eyes. Before Elias could ask again, a soldier's shadow filled the entrance. "Hands up!" the soldier barked, his gun aimed straight at Elias. Elias raised his arms slowly, but his mind raced for a way out. Lyra stood frozen, her breathing sharp. The soldier stepped closer, his voice cold. "So this is the fugitive." His eyes moved to Lyra, and a cruel smile spread across his face. In that moment, the air around Lyra changed. Her eyes blazed like fire, and the ground trembled under their feet. The soldier froze, confused, but before he could fire, he was thrown backward by an invisible force. He crashed against the wall with a scream, his weapon clattering away. Elias stared in shock as Lyra's small body glowed with raw energy, metal bent and twisted around her as if obeying her will. The very air seemed to shiver with power. Elias shouted, "Stop! You'll bring them all here!" But Lyra's fear had turned into something else, something terrifying. The hunters outside shouted in panic, their radios filling with alarm. Elias grabbed her shoulders, shaking her. "Control it, Lyra. Please," he begged. For a moment, her glowing eyes softened and the storm around her calmed. She collapsed into his arms, weak and trembling. Outside, more soldiers rushed to watch the cargo ship shouting orders. The hunt was far from over, and Elias knew their lives would never be the same again. The cargo ship shook with the sound of boots and gunfire outside. Hunters swarmed around the wreck, shouting orders and aiming their weapons. Inside, Elias held Lyra close, her body trembling after the sudden burst of power. Her glowing eyes dimmed, but the metal walls around them still carried the echo of her strength. Elias's mind spun. She was no ordinary alien. She was something far more dangerous. Lyra whispered weakly, "They won't stop." Elias brushed the dirt from her face, whispering back, "Then we run, but not here." He pulled her through the broken corridors of the ship, stepping over fallen wires and rusted panels. Behind them, hunters stormed in, their lights cutting through the shadows. Bullets tore into the walls as Elias dragged Lyra toward the far exit. Suddenly, a grenade rolled across the floor. Elias's eyes widened, but before he could react, Lyra raised her trembling hand. The grenade froze in midair, its red light blinking wildly. With a cry, Lyra hurled it back out the doorway. The explosion lit up the night, throwing hunters off their feet. Elias stopped, stunned, his heart racing. She had saved them, but at the same time, she had revealed her power to everyone. Now the hunters would not only want her, they would fear her. Elias knew fear made men dangerous, more dangerous than any weapon. He tightened his grip on Lyra's hand and whispered, "We keep moving." They slipped out the back of the cargo ship, crawling through wreckage toward the dark edge of the scrapyard. The air was thick with smoke, alarms blaring from the hunters' vehicles. Lyra's breathing was heavy, her body weak after each burst of power. It was clear she could not control it for long. Every time her eyes glowed, Elias felt the ground itself hold its breath. They reached his shack again. The place that once felt safe now felt like a trap. Elias closed the door and blocked it with heavy scrap. He turned to Lyra, his voice sharp but worried. "What are you really?" Lyra's gaze fell to the floor, shame in her glowing eyes. Weapon," she whispered, her voice breaking like glass. Elias shook his head, angry and afraid. "You're not a weapon, you're a child," he said, though even he doubted his own words. Lyra looked at him, her face filled with sorrow. "They made me to fight humans, to destroy," she admitted. Her voice cracked as she added, "But I don't want to hurt. I want to live." For the first time, Elias saw tears roll down her silver skin. He had not thought an alien could cry, but here she was, broken and afraid. He knelt beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "Then live," he said softly, "and I'll protect you." His words were quiet, but they carried a promise even he did not know how to keep. Outside, the hunters regrouped, their leader barking commands. "This thing is not a child, it's a weapon. Capture or kill," the order rang out. Elias heard it through the walls and knew time was running out. They would never stop, not until they had her in chains or in pieces. His home was no longer a hiding place. It was a trap waiting to collapse. Lyra's eyes glowed faintly again, fear and power mixing together. Elias gripped her hands and whispered, "Don't lose yourself. Stay with me." The glow flickered, weaker than before, but enough to light the room in silver shadows. Elias realized she was walking a knife's edge. One moment a child, the next a storm, and if she lost control, not even he could save her. Engines roared again outside, louder than before. More trucks, more soldiers, more hunters ready to finish the hunt. Elias looked at Lyra and knew they had only one choice left. They could not hide, they could not wait. They had to leave the scrapyard forever. But beyond the walls lay a galaxy that might be even more dangerous. The scrapyard no longer felt like home. Smoke rose from the piles of metal as the hunters tightened their search. Elias stood by the door of his shack, listening to the engines and shouts outside. Lyra sat quietly on the bed, her glowing eyes dim, but filled with fear. She knew what Elias already knew. If they stayed, they would die. Elias gathered a small bag, stuffing in food, water, and tools. He moved quickly, his hands shaking, Every second wasted was another step closer to capture. Lyra watched him, her lips parting as if she wanted to speak. Finally, in her broken voice, she asked, "Where? Go?" Elias stopped, staring at the door, and whispered, "Far from here, off this world if we can." The words sounded mad even to him. He was just a scavenger, a man who lived among trash and broken machines, yet now he was planning to run from soldiers, hunters, and maybe the entire government, but he had no other choice. For Lyra, for himself, he had to try. They slipped out the back of the shack into the shadows of the scrap mountains. The night was alive with danger. Floodlights scanned the piles, radios crackled with commands. Elias kept low, pulling Lyra behind him as they crept through the maze. Every sound felt like a trap, every shadow a soldier waiting to strike, but somehow they managed to slip past the search lines. At the far edge of the scrapyard, Elias led Lyra into the ruins of an old city. The place was silent, buildings half collapsed, streets broken with weeds. Once, it had been full of life, but now only echoes remained. Lyra looked around with wide eyes, touching cracked walls and faded signs. To her, even ruins seemed like a strange wonder. They hid inside a crumbling tower as dawn began to rise. Elias let Lyra rest while he searched the place for supplies. He found an old radio, broken but repairable, and a stash of canned food left behind years ago. When he returned, Lyra was awake, staring out the broken window at the sunrise. For a moment, she looked almost human, her silver skin glowing in the light. "Why help me?" she asked suddenly, her voice soft but steady. Elias sat down, the question heavy in the air. He thought about it, about how simple it would have been to leave her in the pod. Finally, he answered, "Because someone had to." Lyra lowered her gaze, whispering, "You, different from them." Elias did not know if that was true, but he knew that helping her had changed something in him. For the first time in years, he felt like he had a reason to fight. Not for money, not for survival, but for someone who believed in him. Even if that someone was not human. That night, as they prepared to move again, Elias heard voices in the distance. Raiders, not soldiers this time, scavengers like him, but with no mercy. They laughed as they searched the ruins, their torches cutting through the dark. Elias pulled Lyra close, whispering, "Stay quiet." But Lyra's glowing eyes betrayed them, a faint light shimmering in the shadows. The raiders noticed, their voices rising in excitement. "Over here, something's glowing," one shouted. Elias cursed under his breath, pulling Lyra toward the back of the tower. The raiders followed, armed with blades and stolen rifles. Unlike the hunters, these men wanted profit, not capture. They cornered Elias and Lyra in the ruins, their grins wide and cruel. "Hand it over, old man," one sneered, pointing at Lyra. Elias stood firm, though his hands shook. Behind him, Lyra's eyes began to glow brighter, her fear turning into fire. The raiders laughed, not knowing what was about to come. And in that moment, Elias realized something. They could not run forever. They had to fight, not just against soldiers and hunters, but against anyone who would try to take her. He had started this journey by accident, but now he knew it had no turning back. Their road was no longer escape. It was survival. The ruins echoed with the laughter of raiders. Their boots stamped on broken stone as they circled Elias and Lyra. The smell of smoke and old fire clung to their clothes. One man raised his rifle, sneering, "The glowing girl is worth more than a ship." Another added, "We'll sell her to the hunters or keep her for ourselves." Elias's stomach twisted, his mind searching for any way out. He held a rusted pipe in his hand, shaking but ready to swing. Lyra stood close to him, her eyes flickering with light. The raiders laughed again, thinking the girl was weak. But then the air around them shifted, heavy and sharp. With a sudden flash, Lyra lifted her hand. The ground cracked and metal shards rose like blades from the rubble. The raiders froze, their grins fading, fear crawling into their eyes. One fired his rifle, but the bullet stopped midair, hanging like a toy. Lyra's voice rang out, trembling but strong. "Leave us." The raiders dropped their weapons and ran, their bravado gone. Their shouts echoed as they disappeared into the ruins. Elias lowered the pipe, staring at Lyra in silence. She collapsed to her knees, her body shaking, sweat shining on her silver skin. Her power had saved them, but it had also drained her. Elias knelt beside her, whispering, "You don't have to do this alone." Lyra looked at him with tired eyes, whispering back, "You should not stay with me." Her words carried weight, as if she had finally accepted something terrible. Elias frowned. "Why not?" His voice low and sharp. Lyra's eyes glowed faintly as she answered, "Because of what I am." They hid inside the ruined tower until dawn. Lyra sat against the wall, her breathing slow, her face pale. Finally, she began to speak, her words halting but clear. "I was not born like you. I was made," she said. Her voice carried both sorrow and truth. Elias listened, his chest tight. Lyra continued. "An empire far away wanted a weapon, something living, something that could not be broken." She lowered her gaze, her silver fingers curling into fists. "They took children, mixed flesh and machine, taught us only war." Her eyes filled with tears, glowing like liquid stars. Elias's jaw tightened, fury rising in him. "They made you a soldier," he said softly. Lyra nodded, whispering, "A soldier who was never meant to grow old, only to kill and die." Her body shook as she added, "But I ran. I escaped them. I did not want to fight anymore." She covered her face, her voice breaking. "That is why they hunt me." The truth sank heavy into Elias's heart. She was not a random alien child. She was the enemy's creation, but she had chosen to run, chosen not to be what they wanted. He reached out and touched her shoulder, steady and firm. "You're not what they made you, Lyra. You're more than that." Lyra looked up at him, her eyes wide, as if she had never heard those words before. Her lips trembled, but no sound came, only silent tears. Elias gave her a small nod, a promise hidden in his tired face. "We'll find a way out, far from here, somewhere they can't touch you." The words felt impossible, but they were all he could give. Just as silence settled over them, a deep rumble shook the ground. Elias rushed to the window, his heart freezing in his chest. Above the ruins, shadows moved across the sky. Ships, black and sharp, descended like vultures, their engines roaring. The hunters were not alone this time. The Empire itself had come. Lyra's face turned pale, her body stiff with terror. Her whisper was soft but filled with dread. "They found me." Elias gripped the rusted pipe tighter, though he knew it was useless. The sky burned with light as enemy ships rained down, and in that moment, Elias understood the real hunt had only just begun. The sky tore open with fire. Black ships descended from the clouds, their engines screaming like thunder. The ruins shook as beams of light cut across the broken streets. Elias pulled Lyra down behind a wall, the heat of the blasts burning the air. The hunters on the ground shouted orders, their radios filled with static. But this time, they were not the hunters, they were prey. The Empire's ships unleashed a storm of energy, tearing through the ruins. Hunters scattered, firing at the sky, their bullets useless against alien armor. Explosions lit the night, metal and stone collapsing around them. Elias gritted his teeth, gripping Lyra's hand. "We can't stay here," he whispered, his voice fierce. Lyra's glowing eyes fixed on the ships above, fear mixing with anger. "They will not stop," she said, her voice low. Elias nodded, pulling her through the rubble. Every step a fight for survival. An alien craft dropped low, its landing claws smashing into the ground. Doors hissed open, and armored figures stepped out. They were tall, cold, their bodies half metal, their eyes burning with red light. Lyra froze, her breath caught in her throat. She whispered, "They are like me, but not free." The soldiers marched forward, weapons glowing with energy. Elias knew he could not fight them, not with his bare hands, but he had survived scavenger wars, and he still had his mind. He spotted a broken fuel tank among the ruins. His heart raced with an idea that could kill them, or kill himself. He dragged Lyra toward it, shouting, "Cover your ears!" Then he grabbed a rusted flare from his bag, striking it against the wall. The flare burst to life, bright and fierce. He threw it into the leaking fuel. The explosion shook the ruins, fire swallowing the alien soldiers. The blast threw Elias and Lyra across the ground. His ears rang, dust choking his lungs, but when he opened his eyes, he saw the alien soldiers still moving. Their armor burned, but their bodies would not stop. They were machines wearing the mask of flesh. Lyra's fear turned to fury, her hands trembling with light. She raised them, and the ground itself responded. Metal shards lifted into the air, spinning like blades. With a cry, she sent them crashing into the soldiers. Sparks flew as armor cracked, red eyes dimming one by one. Elias watched in awe, but also fear. Her power was beautiful and terrifying. She looked less like a child and more like a storm given form. The ruins shook as she unleashed everything inside her. The alien ship above turned its guns on her, aiming to end the threat. Elias tackled her to the ground, shouting, "Stop, they'll kill you." The blast scorched the air above them. Lyra gasped, her power flickering out, her body weak again. Elias held her tight, whispering, "Not here, not like this." They needed to escape, not fight an army. Through the smoke, a new voice called, "Over here," it shouted, deep and rough. Elias turned to see a smuggler ship, old and battered, landing among the chaos. A man leaned out, waving frantically. "If you want to live, get inside." Elias hesitated, not knowing if it was a trap, but another blast shook the ground, forcing his choice. He pulled Lyra toward the ship, both stumbling across the broken street. Alien fire rained down behind them, hunters screaming, ruins collapsing. They climbed the ramp as the smuggler slammed the hatch shut, engines roared, and the ship lifted into the burning sky. Elias held Lyra close, her body shaking with exhaustion. She whispered, "They will chase us," her eyes dimming. Elias looked out the window as the city vanished in flames. "Yes," he said quietly, "but now we fight on our terms." The battle for their lives had only just begun. The smuggler's ship rattled as it climbed into the dark sky. Engines screamed, metal groaned, every panel shaking as if it might fall apart. Elias held Lyra close on the floor, shielding her from the violent turbulence. Across the cabin, the smuggler strapped himself into a chair, grinning through broken teeth. "Name's Jarek," he shouted over the noise, "and you just bought yourselves the most dangerous ride in this sector." Elias narrowed his eyes, his arms still tight around Lyra. "What do you want for helping us?" he asked, suspicion sharp in his tone. Jarek laughed, his voice rough. "Credits, food, favors, doesn't matter, but first we survive." He pulled the ship into a dive, enemy fire streaking past the windows. The stars blurred as they broke through the clouds and into the cold void of space. Lyra shivered against Elias's chest, her skin pale, her eyes dim. She whispered faintly, "They follow, always." Elias brushed a hand across her hair, whispering back, "Not this time." But his voice lacked certainty, his heart heavy with doubt. He had seen the Empire's reach. No wall, no planet, no scrapyard could hide them. Hours passed before the ship finally steadied. The stars stretched wide around them, endless and cold. Jarek leaned back in his seat, lighting a small stick of smoke. "You've got trouble. I can smell it," he said, his eyes sharp on Lyra. "And if I'm right, trouble like hers always comes with a tracker." Elias froze, his stomach twisting. Jarek tapped his temple, nodding. "They knew where to land, didn't they? They always knew. That means she's marked." Lyra's eyes widened, her breath quickening. She shook her head, whispering, "I don't want it." Elias felt his blood turn cold. She hadn't even realized what they had done to her. Jarek slammed a toolbox onto the table. "Only way you live is to cut it out now," he said, his tone grim. Elias clenched. His fists, his voice low. "She's just a girl, not some machine to tear apart." Jarek growled back. "She's a beacon, old man. Keep it in her and you're both dead by morning." The air grew heavy, every word sinking like a stone. Lyra touched Elias's arm, her voice trembling. "Do it, please." Her glowing eyes begged him, even though fear shook her body. Elias's heart broke, but he nodded slowly. He laid her on the table, his hands trembling as he opened the smuggler's kit. Knives, wires, old scanners. It looked more like torture than medicine. He took a deep breath, whispering, "Stay with me, Lyra." She nodded, biting her lip as he pressed the scanner against her chest. A faint signal blinked on the screen, deep under her skin, near her ribs. Elias cursed softly, sweat on his brow. He had fixed engines, weapons, and machines all his life, but never something alive, never someone he cared about. The ship creaked as he made the first cut. Lyra gasped, her body tense, but she did not cry out. Her glowing eyes locked on Elias, trusting him completely. He dug carefully, every second feeling like hours. Finally, his fingers touched something cold and sharp inside her. A small metal chip, pulsing with red light. Elias pulled it free, slamming it onto the table. Jarek grabbed it with a rag, tossing it into the ship's incinerator. The beacon sizzled and vanished in a burst of smoke. For the first time in days, the ship was silent. Lyra collapsed against Elias, weak but alive. Her breathing was ragged, but she whispered, "Free." Elias held her close, his chest tight, his hands still stained with her blood. "You're safe now," he said, though his voice was broken. Outside, the stars shone cold and endless, but the silence did not last. A transmission crackled through the radio, deep and harsh. "This is the Empire. Surrender the weapon or be destroyed," Jarek cursed, slamming his fist against the console. "They already know where we are. Cutting the tracker only bought us time." Elias looked down at Lyra, her fragile body glowing faintly in the dark. He knew she was no longer just a girl he had saved in the scrapyard. She was hope. She was danger. She was something greater than both, and if they wanted her back, they would have to kill him first. The battle was far from over. It was only just beginning. The smuggler's ship drifted in the cold dark of space. The stars outside burned like silent fires, distant and unforgiving. Inside, tension filled the cabin heavier than steel. The Empire's transmission echoed again through the speakers. "Surrender the weapon or be destroyed." Lyra lay weak on the table, her chest bandaged, her glowing eyes half closed. Elias stared at the radio, his jaw tight. He could feel the Empire's shadow stretching across the stars. Jarek cursed under his breath, slamming buttons on the console. "They'll find us no matter where we hide," the smuggler growled, smoke curling from his lips. "Your little friend there is the key to a war bigger than you can imagine." Elias sat in silence, his hand resting on Lyra's shoulder. Her eyes flickered open, soft and fragile. "They will not stop," she whispered. He nodded grimly. "I know." But in his chest, a storm of doubt raged. He had taken her from the scrapyard, sworn to protect her. But now his choice threatened the whole world. Jarek leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "Listen, old man, you have two paths." He raised two fingers, dirty and scarred. "One, you run forever, hide in shadows and pray the Empire never catches you. 2, you turn her over to the humans, warn them before it's too late." His voice dropped low. "But if they see what she is, they won't thank you. They'll fear you both." Elias clenched his fists, the truth pressing on him like a weight. He looked at Lyra, her silver skin shining faintly under the ship's lights. She was just a child, yet the Empire called her a weapon. If he brought her to the humans, would they see her here, tire only her power? Would they save her or put her in chains? Lyra's small voice broke his thoughts. "Elias, they hate me." Her words cut deep, sharp as a blade. He shook his head quickly. "Not all of them, not if they understand." She looked at him with tears glimmering in her eyes. "I am not human," Elias whispered back. "You are more human than any of them." The ship rattled as Jarek pulled it out of a drift, engines groaning. "We can reach a human outpost within a day," the smuggler said. "But once you step inside, there's no going back. They'll choose if you live or die." Elias stared out the window at the endless dark. His choice burned inside him like fire. Hide and doom Earth, or reveal Lyra and risk losing her. Hours turned into silence, only the hum of engines filling the air. Elias sat awake while Lyra slept, his thoughts heavy and sharp. He remembered the scrapyard, the day he found her broken in the pod. He remembered the word she whispered then. Hunter. And now he knew. He was no longer only hunted. He was carrying a secret the galaxy feared. When dawn finally rose across the stars, Elias made his choice. He turned to Jarek and said, "Take us to the outpost." The smuggler raised an eyebrow, a smirk tugging at his lips. Brave or stupid, can't tell which. Elias ignored him, his hand tightening around Lyra's. If humanity is going to fight, they need to know the truth. The outpost came into view, metal towers floating in the void, guns bristling along its surface. As the ship approached, warning alarms blared, human voices demanding identification. Jarek cursed, broadcasting codes, his voice smooth with lies. The hatch prepared to open, soldiers waiting inside with rifles. Elias whispered to Lyra, "Stay behind me, no matter what happens." The ramp lowered, cold air rushing inside. Elias stepped forward, his hands raised, Lyra at his side, human-souled. Ire stared, their eyes narrowing the moment they saw her glowing skin. One barked, "Down on the ground, both of you. Don't let it move." Lyra clutched Elias's sleeve, her body trembling. Elias raised his voice, desperate. "Wait, she's not your enemy, she's your warning." The soldiers closed in, rifles aimed steady. Their commander stepped forward, his voice cold. "The only warning I see is a weapon we should have destroyed long ago." And in that moment, Elias realized his greatest fear was true. Humans were no different from hunters. The human outpost trembled under the weight of silence. Soldiers surrounded Elias and Lyra, rifles aimed steady, their eyes cold and sharp. Elias's voice echoed across the hangar. "Listen to me. She's not here to hurt you. She's here to save you." But the commander's gaze never softened, his lips curling with disgust. "She's not a savior," he barked. "She's a weapon, and weapons get locked away." Lyra clung to Elias's sleeve, her glowing eyes wide with fear. She whispered, "They hate me," her voice trembling. Elias whispered back, "Don't be afraid. Stay with me." But deep in his heart, he felt the soldiers' hatred pressing closer. No words, no truth seemed strong enough to break through their fear. Before the commander could give the final order, alarms shrieked across the outpost. Red lights flashed, metal walls rattled. The sound of distant explosions shook the air. A soldier shouted, "Contact multiple enemy ships, they've found us." The commander's face twisted in shock. "Raise shields, prepare the guns." But it was already too late. Through the hangar windows, black shapes filled the void. Dozens of Empire warships descended, their engines glowing like fire. The first blast struck, shaking the station to its core. Panels fell from the ceiling, sparks rained down on the soldiers. The invasion had begun, swift and merciless. Elias pulled Lyra behind cover as explosions ripped through the hangar. Soldiers scattered, shouting orders, firing into a sky, but their weapons were too small, their walls too weak. The Empire's cannons tore through metal as if it were paper. The outpost was falling, and Earth was next. Lyra stared at the window, her silver skin glowing brighter. Her voice was soft but heavy. "They will kill them all." Elias grabbed her arm, shaking his head. "You can't. They'll see you as the same monster they fear." Lyra's lips trembled, her eyes burning like stars. "I don't care," she whispered. "I will not let them die." With a cry, she rose, her small body shining like a beacon. The air around her shivered, machines rattling as if bowing to her will. Soldiers froze, their rifles lowered, fear and awe mixing in their faces. Then the hangar burst open as an Empire soldier stormed inside, towering and armored. Lyra raised her hand, and with a surge of power, she flung him into the wall. Elias shielded his eyes from the storm that followed. Lyra's voice rang out like thunder. "Leave them!" Waves of invisible force slammed into the enemy, crushing metal and bone alike. The Empire's ships outside turned their guns on the station, desperate to silence her. But Lyra's power rose higher, brighter, unstoppable. She lifted her arms, and the very void seemed to bend. Energy crackled, ripping through the black ships, tearing them apart. Explosions lit the stars, burning brighter than dawn. The humans stared in silence, their fear turning into disbelief. The child they wanted to cage was fighting to save them, but the cost was heavy. Lyra screamed, her body shaking, blood streaking down her silver skin. Elias rushed to her side, shouting, "Stop, you'll kill yourself!" Her glowing eyes dimmed for a moment, her lips trembling. "I can't stop," she whispered, "or they will all die." The commander, once full of hatred, now stood frozen. He watched as Lyra destroyed the enemy fleet with her bare hands, but instead of pride, his face filled with fear deeper than before. He whispered to his soldiers, "She's too powerful. If she lives, none of us are safe." Elias heard the words, his heart twisting with rage. Outside, the last of the enemy ships exploded into flame. The station shook, debris scattering across the void. Lyra fell forward, collapsing into Elias's arms, her power finally fading. She was alive, but weak, her chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. And as silence filled the hangar, the soldiers raised their rifles again. The hangar was filled with smoke and silence. Burning metal hissed. Alarms blared faintly in the distance. Soldiers stood in a circle, rifles raised, their eyes locked on Lyra. She lay weak in Elias's arms, her silver skin streaked with blood, her glow fading. Moments ago she had saved them all, yet now they looked at her as if she were a monster. Elias's voice cut through the air, sharp and furious. "You saw what she did. She saved your lives." But the commander's face was hard as stone, his eyes cold. "She also destroyed ships with her mind," he snapped. "No human should have that power." He raised his hand, ready to give the order. "She is too dangerous to live." Elias's heart pounded, his body tense. He pulled Lyra closer, his voice low but steady. "If you want her, you'll have to kill me first." The soldiers hesitated, their rifles trembling. For years they had followed orders without question, but now doubt flickered in their eyes. Was this alien girl truly their enemy, or their only hope? Lyra stirred weakly, whispering, "Elias, don't." Her eyes glowed faintly, full of sorrow. "If they fear me, I should go." Elias shook his head fiercely. "No, you are not their enemy." His voice broke with emotion. "You're the reason they're still alive." He looked at the soldiers, shouting, "Don't let your fear blind you." Before anyone could answer, the station shook violently. A massive shadow passed over the windows, blocking out the stars. The Empire's flagship had arrived, black and vast, dwarfing everything in sight, its weapons powered up, glowing like suns preparing to burn. The invasion was not over. The real battle had just begun. The commander's face drained of color. "All guns, fire," he ordered, but his voice carried no hope. Everyone knew the outpost could not withstand such power. Panic filled the hangar, soldiers rushing to their stations. But Elias stood still, his arms wrapped around Lyra. Her voice came soft, trembling. "I can stop them." Elias's eyes widened, his chest tightening. "No, it will kill you." Lyra looked at him with glowing tears, whispering, "If I don't, Earth will burn." The choice hung heavy between them, sacrifice or survival. Elias's throat burned as he whispered, "There must be another way." Lyra touched his face gently, her small hand cold. "You gave me life when I had nothing," she said, her voice like broken glass. "You saw me not as a weapon, but as a child." Her eyes glowed brighter, fierce and beautiful. "Now let me choose what I am." Elias's tears fell, but he nodded slowly, his heart breaking. She rose from his arms, standing unsteady but proud. Her glow spread, brighter and brighter, until the hangar itself shimmered. The soldiers stepped back, their rifles lowering in awe. Lyra floated upward, her voice carrying across the station. "I am not your enemy, I am your shield." Her body shone like a star, light pouring from her hands. Outside, the flagship unleashed its weapons, beams of death racing toward the outpost. But Lyra raised her arms, her light colliding with the storm. The void exploded in brilliance, fire against fire, power against power. The flagship shook, its engines tearing apart, its hull splitting like glass. The explosion lit the stars brighter than dawn. When the light faded, the flagship was gone, only wreckage drifting in silence. Lyra hovered for a moment, her glow flickering weakly. Then she collapsed, falling back into Elias's arms, barely breathing. Her whisper was faint. "Did I save them?" All. The soldiers lowered their rifles completely, shame in their eyes. The commander bowed his head, silent and broken. For the first time, they saw her not as a weapon, but as hope. Elias held her close, his heart heavy with both pride and fear, because as she drifted into unconsciousness, she whispered one last warning. "They will come again. Stronger."